back to the Journey Not Real Talk. Today's episode is Tech Careers Insider, the Machine Learning and Data Science edition. AI is everywhere, in products, in job description, and in the expectations placed on roles at every level. Today, we are talking about what it really means to start a career in tech in the age of AI. If you are early in your career, trying to break into tech, or coming from a non-traditional background, this conversation is for you. I'm really honored to be joined today by two special guests with decades of experience at the world's leading tech companies. Let's welcome them. Hi, Mark. Hi, Antonio. Thanks so much for joining me. Can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and how you found your way into tech?
Yeah, so I studied mathematics at university, and then around 2009 ended up working in quantitative finance. I spent maybe a decade there doing different statistical methods, and towards the latter end of that time, machine learning was coming to the fore, and I realized it was going to be the dominant paradigm. At that point, I was looking to leave finance anyway, so I transitioned to work at a London startup, Faculty AI, in 2019 to work in machine learning. And I spent 5 years there working on a range of problems, which I can talk about in the main podcast. And I'd always had a passion to work in education. And with my machine learning background, I then decided to leave in 2024 summer and start my own education technology company, which I've been doing ever since. So nice to meet you.
Thank you, Mark. And Antonio?
I think similar to Mark, I started my journey actually also with quant finance. So I studied finance for my master degree, but then I just transitioned to a tech career. And then I've been working in tech industry for I think like over 12 years for now. So I started with like eBay, and then I moved to Revolut, which is a fintech startup in London back in the day. And now I'm also working for another big tech company in London. And I transitioned from like as an IC or individual contributor, like you are doing like data scientist, analyzing data, building pipeline, machine learning models, into now I'm transitioning to management role as well.
Amazing. So let's dive straight in, shall we? So what is really like starting out in technology right now with AI everywhere? Have you guys seen, in the market in terms of how the landscape is changing?
Well, I think that's a very broad questions. So one thing for sure that let's talk about the industry overall. We see that a lot of tech startups company building AI or companies, traditional companies are adopting AI in like day-to-day use. So
Mm.
yes, 100% AI is growing at I think unprecedented space. We never saw that kind of growth before. It was exciting, but also scary at the same time. So I think even like we work at a big company, we also like trying to catch up with all the news, how to use all the toolings of AI to make our life easier, improve our efficiency, and so on. I think that's great, but that's also like very kind of to me it's unclear to some extent how the
Mm.
future would look like. There were predictions, but yeah, I think that's a lot of paths that we could follow in the future.
Like Antonio, I have like my own perspective, and I have just people in my network who we've been talking about this constantly for almost the last 2 years now. I think the first thing to say is everybody is feeling like they're confused and catching up. Like the pace of change is absolutely rapid. Almost weekly or daily, you are seeing new tools, new frameworks, new things that are coming out that are supposedly, changing the landscape. I think if you were to be inside an incumbent company that is not that technologically advanced, your day to day has probably not changed that much. You've probably got some internal projects that are going on. When I talk to people in traditional industries like, accountancy, finance, law, they've got some internal tooling that's now being built, but by and large, their day to day hasn't changed. If you look inside tech companies or particularly smaller companies, this is where you're seeing the most upheaval, right? Particularly if you go to startups, like I've got many people on my network who are at companies that are like, 5 to 10 people big. There it is fully fledged. These companies are being built AI first. They are fully embracing the move fast, break things of the early Facebook era, and they're using AI to do this. Obviously, it's very hard you know, to predict how that ripple effect will go. What typically happens in paradigm shifts like this is that the large companies eventually get their act together and there is some consolidation where the small companies get bought up. And I think over the last 6-12 months, you've seen companies like Google finally start to really catch up in the AI space and start to put out products very much at the cutting edge and now on a par or better than, Anthropic and OpenAI. So I think to summarize back to your question, like, what is it like at the minute? It's chaotic. How much you're feeling that chaos definitely depends on your vantage point in the industry. I think if you are in a big company, you're probably not feeling it, but that also may mean that when you do feel it, it's very abrupt and you are too far behind. And we can talk about some of the ways to prepare yourself for that later.
Want to also like double down on one point that Mark just said on, yeah, I think maybe for us, because we are closer to the industry, you can feel the pace extremely fast. But I could imagine that for some other people, for some organizations, we might not see it yet. I think the key word is yet. I think I'm quite confident that at some point it will. And yeah, that's what I think is so exciting about this area. And everyone should prepare themselves for the new changes.
Well, just to carry on that point then, Antonio, it sounds like we probably both agree that AI, for all the hype, right, and there is a lot of hype, and for all the over-promising, I definitely do believe, and I've been a skeptic of some of the stronger claims, I do believe it will be a transformative technology, even if progress kind of stalls. Like, I think there is enough capability in today's models to spend the next decade, like, putting that across the economy and realizing the productivity gains.
Yes, 100%. On the hype, yes, the hype exists, but I think we can see it's improving, like the tooling we're using improving day by day, from just being an assistant to like helping us, something like co-pilot. We work with them, and now they can be just like serving or executing what we want them to do. Just give them a task, give a goal, and they could execute end to end. It's just like how amazing and so powerful that the AI tools are developing right now. So yeah, super excited about that as well.
Yeah, and I think you've seen this last wave of progress as not necessarily being in like base model capability. It's been into the like integration of the model into its external environment, right? Its ability to connect to, all the different tools, to your Notion, to your WhatsApp, to your Telegram, to whatever else it needs to do, and bring the experience like, almost seamlessly back to the user. And that sort of environmental friction being removed and the base model capability increasing and all the UX around it, I think is just going to unlock like so many product opportunities.
100%. Yeah.
So I think as you guys said, right, there is chaotic. There's a lot of things happening at the moment. A lot of organizations are still testing and they are learning to adopt AI. And obviously you guys from the industry leading companies, so you've seen that, a lot quicker than a lot of organizations. And as Mark says, that for big organization, when they want to adopt technology, right, it will take time because that would have an impact on their whole processes, systems, people, how fast people can kind of upskill themselves and also their operating model is as well. So I think to your point, it's chaotic. There's a lot of things going on and AI is replacing a lot of jobs, right? We have a lot of tools nowadays that can automate the process. However, also at the same time, it creates a lot of opportunities, a lot of products, a lot of work that needs to be done so that we can work with AI and build a new processor system. Because I know that there are, topics like responsible AI. So how should we use AI? How govern it? So we ensure that it will bring value to us, but also at the same time, make sure that it won't, behave ethically. So back to the point that now AI can automate a lot of tasks. And I think that also includes a lot of tasks that have been done by analysts. So for people who are just starting out their career. Antonio, what are the skills that you have seen that are actually in demand at the moment? And I think including for experienced professionals, but also for people who are starting out their career in technology.
Yeah, good questions. There are some fundamental skills that we still require, like programming skills or mathematics and machine learning, especially if you work in like tech industry. So those are the fundamental skills that I think will still be required as is. However, I think those skills in demand are declining as we know that I think in a lot of big tech companies nowadays, we are hiring less and less junior people, and if they want to hire a bit more senior people. And the idea here is that we can have maybe a few leads or senior people work in a smaller team, and then we use AI to execute or automate a lot of the work that used to be done by juniors members of the team. And because of that, I think the bar for entry level is getting much higher. It used to be maybe you're a fresh graduate or you can get the internship. Now those positions are a lot fewer in demands. And even for entry level right now, I think they might require a few years of experience just to get into that area. So that's definitely like an impact of AI in the industry right now. And beside the technical skill, what I observe is that I think there was still like I would say human-based skills that's still very much in need. And even now, I think it seems to be like the one that still like set human apart from machine. How you communicate, how you use your critical thinking, how you deal with different stakeholders and partners, negotiating with people. So those are the critical human skills that I believe AI not yet able to replace us. And those skills are getting a bit more in demand. That's kind of reflect a bit into the hiring in the industry right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting phenomenon, and this happens often during economic downturns where it's very hard for young graduates to get jobs. And often what you see at those times is like a wave of sometimes innovation where the graduates can't go into traditional routes, so they have to do something else. They have to take a risk and potentially start a company. And I think that whilst it's tough for the next generation coming through, it has never been easier now to start a company and to build a product. So I think it's potentially quite an exciting time if you're a young person. Yes, you might not get the big job at big tech that you wanted with a high salary, but you'll potentially be presented with an opportunity and a tool set that has never been afforded to people in your position before in the past. I think there's probably another point to say around skills that are in demand and people's, you know, ability to learn them and need to still invest, as Antonio was saying. Like it has always been the case, and I think it will be true that the strongest performers are those with the biggest knowledge bases and the best skill sets. Like the people who will be best placed to adapt are those who still have the strongest skills and the greatest knowledge. And so I think that won't be people who outsource everything to AI. It will be people whose internalized knowledge lets them both direct and verify what an AI can produce. Like verification of what an AI produces requires expertise, right? By definition, it can do a lot of things that humans can't. And to be able to capture that value adequately and make sure it's working as expected, you need expertise. And so there's always going to be a role, I think, for human expertise to play, if not a creation aspect in some of the endeavors that go on, definitely a verification aspect.
I like your point, Mark, on how AI can enable a lot of new startups and ideas to thrive and also open up new opportunities for a lot of new ideas and probably like less traditional kind of work, which I think very exciting time to see how that shift in the industry would look like.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy, right? So I'm obviously starting my own company, and your base level of performance now is not like Village Idiot like mine would have been. I was doing negotiating a contract earlier this week, and if I had to have done that contract before, I'd had to pay a lawyer. Whereas now I have Claude, and Claude is my lawyer. Claude drafts me the things, drafts me the clauses. My base level now, and everyone's base level, if you're willing to engage properly, is as good as the strongest AI out there, or your ability to capture value from it. So suddenly if you think of a skill wheel where you've got skills on different dimensions, suddenly your skill wheel is massively pushed out on every dimension. And so the problems you can tackle that previously you would have been too scared to tackle, or things you would never have thought to do, are suddenly opportunities for you, or there's something you could, go for and maybe one aspect you weren't so strong at, it was holding you back. Whereas now you can get an AI to fill in your weakness in that area. And I think that is a massive, just
Yeah.
enabler and a
Yes.
crazy
Yes.
opportunity, right?
Yeah, exactly. Another example is think about building like a website or an app. Like 10 years ago, it would take a team to build like an app. Right now, you just write one line of sentence, and then, then it can help you generate like hundreds of thousands of lines of code that is productionized easily, and you can just like show up your ideas and your products or whatever you like. So yes, I fully agree. I think that is a great help to any business or owner out there if you want to set up something.
Yeah, like your points there as well. Obviously, it's a great opportunity for people to actually, can start their own business or build like a portfolio, for example, right? So in the case of fresh grads, for example, I think this is a very kind of example of how you need to be creative. So basically, instead of thinking, okay, how can I get into these tech roles from a traditional route through jobs applications, things like that, and from my experience, like, part-time job, for example, they need to think about, okay, so how can I use AI or technology to show people that I can do stuff and to build their own experience by creating their own thing. It can be an application or it can be something else. So it's really about their perspective and how they see this, whether it's an opportunity or a threat. Coming back to the point about the roles. So, Antonio, I know that you mentioned that there's a lot of roles that are getting removed, and there are fewer opportunities for fresh grads. Today's edition is the machine learning and data science edition. So let's talk about the roles in this space. So usually nowadays, right, there are three common key roles that people talk a lot about: data engineers, data scientists, and machine learning engineers. For those who are very new to this game, what do these people do? What are the differences in these three roles? And what is your perspective on the future of these roles as AI comes into play?
Sure, maybe I have a quick overview because I think even
Mm,
the roles itself can the exact responsibilities may vary depend on the industry or the companies and so on. But
mm,
other very like, simple level, data engineers they help to build some kind of data pipeline, data warehouse, ensure the quality and availability of the data. So they care about more like a fundamental like data set for other people to use. And those other people, so I would say the first layer. The next layer is on, I would say, data scientists. Data scientist is the one who would use those data set built by data engineer to find some patterns, to generate some dashboard, to work with A/B testing or experimentations to understand the impact of certain changes in your product, or try to answer a business questions. For example, why our revenue is declining. So, and by the data, using the data that data engineer have to build early on. And the key things of data scientists, and actually very similar to machine learning engineers, the component of forecasting or predictive kind of power. So, for example, we should be able to forecast how maybe next month the sales would be like X million dollar or something like that. And they use a kind of forecasting model to do that. And similarly, and I would say like on top of that, the machine learning engineers they have even more unique skill set. They can use some advanced machine learning algorithms to deploy, to design some kind of AI model that can generate a lot more like complicated predictions on solution. Think about you buy something on Amazon and you see a recommend products that you may like to buy. So those are the job has been done by machine learning engineers. But in general, I think there in the bigger companies, when we have a lot of people, we can have a team of like multiple data engineers, multiple data scientists, and multiple machine learning engineers working in the same problems, and they can have very unique scope. But in let's say in a startup, usually we have maybe one or two data scientists who do everything end to end. That's probably like what Mark is doing right now, like getting the data and then building the model, building some dashboard. So that's the people we call like unicorn data scientists, and those who can do everything themselves when you're in your startup.
You're completely right, and I definitely agree with your earlier point that the definition to those roles like changes quite a lot depending on industry and company. Like it's quite confusing sometimes. I've done a lot of interviewing for some of those roles in the past, and people's expectations of what is required from them, even just for data scientists, like can vary quite a lot and within a company. Some companies think a data scientist should be, just writing SQL all day, whereas other people think they should be, able to deploy in the cloud, et cetera, et cetera. Like it varies quite substantially.
Exactly. So I think actually one thing I want to also call out, especially for, let's say if the audience here is like fresh graduates, sometimes just I don't feel like don't be shy to apply for different roles. I've seen people, for example, say, "Oh, I think I want to apply for data analyst." It's not data analyst role; it is business analyst, for example. So sometimes like don't worry too much about the title, and because like I think a lot of employers don't even know what that role means. Sometimes they think that data scientist is the one who do everything. And they don't even know about the exact requirements. So don't be shy. Just like research more about the companies and what is required, and don't be shy to apply to and as many kind of data and AI roles uh, as you see it might fit your background. So yeah, I think that's another point.
No, I think that's great advice.
See, I've heard the same story about, software developer and back-end developer, software engineer. I think it's very similar stories as well, when the role description versus what you actually do are very different. AI agents, people start talking about all of these, right? Comes into play. What is your perspective on the future of all of the roles that we just mentioned? Will they evolve, or, will they be impacted by AI agents?
Yeah, I think on the one hand, it's getting a lot like easier and faster to some extent. I've seen
Mm,
people doing probably like 95% of their code that's done by AI.
mm,
So on the one hand, I think it might be much easier to do certain kind of tasks and jobs.
mm.
But on the other hand, yeah, I think of course if you think that your kind of role can be replaced by AI, then why do we still hire it, right? So I think that there might be different skill sets that needed. It's more like how you define the problem in a very ambiguous kind of environment, how to translate some business problem into an like a data problem, for example, which and that's why I think go back to my first point on yeah, I think that's why I think the senior role might still be there and more in need, but the junior roles is slightly harder to get and to break into at the moment. But yeah, I also don't know what the future of AI. This is very hard to tell.
You tell, right?
Yeah, I was going to say it's $1 million question, but it feels like it's probably like the billion or $1 trillion question, really. Yeah, I think I agree with everything you said. I would probably also say that what we're probably seeing is that the bottleneck is not on writing code anymore, right? I mean, some people would argue the bottleneck has never been on writing code. The bottleneck in any business developing a product, for example, is on other things like clarity of making sure you're building the right thing for your customers, the prioritization of the activities in which you work on, the coordination of how you propagate that strategy or product vision throughout the organization. And I think at the limit of where code is cheap to generate and you've got many parties generating code, the bottlenecks will just become externalized into other processes, such as how do you possibly move in a coherent fashion when you've suddenly got N agents all quickly, the ground is shifting underneath you faster. Those decisions around what products are we building, who is it for, everything else, how do we coordinate this into a coherent thing that doesn't become a brittle, thing built on sand, will become ever more important. Yeah, I mean, coordination is like an N squared problem, right? So there's going to be more of that as you have more parties involved generating things fast. And so I do think the roles will change, but I think they won't ever not need humans is my optimistic view. And I think one way to potentially see this is to think of there is not a fixed set of problems to work on and then we stop. As technology advances, the set of things which we can tackle becomes even greater. And so the sphere of possibilities just keeps expanding, right? There are things we couldn't touch before because we didn't have today's tools. We can now touch them. And so the set of things we can build is even bigger. And think of all the problems in the world and everything we might want to solve. It's just becoming more within our reach, right? So there will always be possibilities to do that. So I think the roles will evolve, but I don't think they'll go away. They definitely change from writing code itself to more of an orchestration
Yeah.
aspect, and some of the other soft skills that Antonio talked about as well.
Yeah, I think that makes absolute sense. And also further down the line, as we at the very early stage of all of these, right? When it comes to the value question as well. So, okay, now we invested in all of these AI technology tools. So what is the value that it's bringing? And I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in that space. For our audience who are starting out their career in tech or fresh grads who are applying for jobs, what are your advice for them at the moment when applying for job?
I think I can give a few. So I think we are also started out fresh as a fresh graduate before. We know the pain. And I
Mm,
think my first advice is always like be resilient. I think it's a tough game if you want to break into any companies. I think that's still great. I mean, we talk about starting up before, but startup is hard. Like everyone knows that. Mark knows for sure. It's so difficult. I think, and of course, the safer route is of course you go like work in a company, and as we mentioned about competitions earlier, so I think it's much harder to break into tech industry or any industries at the moment in general. So I think like my first advice is like mentally prepare or like for like be resilient and yeah, try to push for it. I heard story people applying to like thousands of applications. Again, using AI tool can help you to apply to like thousands of role with one click and still like no response. So like be ready for that. I think a few things on AI is that yeah, I think also make AI work for you. Just like a previous example, know what AI tools can do for you. I think now I feel like young people can be much faster on like adopting and using the tools than us, like older people. So I think that's great. I think let's try to make it our like friend and leverage AIs to help us do research, preparing for interview questions and so on. And the third point I would say is to I think like look broader, like don't just like focus on one or two area, like maybe beyond tech industry, maybe into some like less traditional industry as well. There may be opportunities out there. Think about like I think back like 20 years ago, finance was like top of the top, right? And then both me and Mark I studied finance before, expecting oh we can work in finance. And then for me, I also felt like it's not for me. And finance now it's still cool, but probably less cool compared to like 20 years ago. So I think I'm sure that I think in the next, I don't know, like 10, 20 years that there could be new exciting roles available and the new adopters gonna benefit a lot from that. Um,
No, I think that's great advice. I think my number one advice would sound a bit cliche, but it's something that is always rung true to me on my personal experience and people in my network, versus anything you see on social media. If you watch on social media, you can see horror stories of how difficult it is to get hired. But then equally, like in my personal network, I would see many stories of people who get jobs not because of nepotism, but because they have a network of people who know them and trust them. And I think honestly, people trust people, right? People don't know you from a CV. Like if you can actually make connections either through a social community online or in person, then the trust level of someone who's going to take a chance on you and hire you is so much greater, right? If you can actually demonstrate to someone, whether that's through an online portfolio, that you actually know what you say, because you can build it. Like it's just much easier for someone to separate your CV out from the other thousands that they've had. Like many times, if you go to any of the many networking events in London, and I'm sure it's the same across the country as well, it is just very easy if you are someone in the industry who knows what you're doing, within a few minutes of talking to someone, if they also know what they're talking about, and if they're interested in getting a job, it's a no-brainer that you would then put them in contact with someone or that you would ask them for an interview yourself. So I think don't underestimate the power of the human connection and being able to make that. And I know obviously, Ty, that's something that you're very, at the forefront of what you're doing as a business. But I do think you shouldn't underestimate that, particularly in a world where now, like Antonio said, you can almost apply at a click in thousands of jobs. And I think this will go the same way on social media as well. Is in a world where content generation is cheap, people are going to start valuing more and more the human experience, right? They will want to see the authenticity and the trust element to the fore. So I'm sure job applications these days have got thousands of bots applying for them.
Yes, I think exactly 100% what Mark said. But I think I want to also like flag that that kind of human building kind of connection thing is not easy. It is hard. It's much, much harder than AI or like building some resume, applying to something online right now. So I think like accepting the fact that it is hard is also like a good like a mental mindset that everyone should prepare. It is hard, but I think it could be your ticket to the company or the job or whatsoever. So yes, don't just like focus or over index on one way of applying. Also, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think I've seen this in so many of the Journey Notes events as well. The themes keeps coming back, and all of these are from the people who have been around in the industry and working for decades, right? 30 years or so. And we had the event in Hanoi recently in December. Our guest speakers also said that building connections and building your networks is very important nowadays. Don't just send CV. That is really easy. Everyone can do that. And when everyone can do that, it's no longer your, competitive advantage, right? You need to go out and speak to people, build that relationships, build that connections. And actually, it's also a good way for you to understand the company's cultures as well, from talking to its employees. So I think, again, this reinforced our point earlier that human skills are still very important, right? And it's even more important now when AI can actually do our job. And for Antonio, I think as well, it's very similar to the case that when you want to get promoted at companies, right? Even if you're not a fresh grad, but then when you want to get promoted, you also need human skills, right? Even though you work in technology, but you also need skills like communication, leading a team, managing, like the productivity of the team, managing different or difficult stakeholders, right?
Yep, yep, 100%.
Moving on to the next part. So how can people break into machine learning without a computer science degree? Is it possible for people to break into machine learning without a computer science degree?
100%. I think computer science degree is obviously one of the top ones, but equally there are other degrees that are equally as good. I think if you've got a strong technical degree, you're very well. I think fundamentally, like and Antonio talked about this when he talks about the definitions of the roles. Most of these roles, machine learning, data science, are about solving business problems with data, right? There is nothing in a computer science degree, which is usually quite theoretical, which is uniquely suited to that, right? That is somewhat of a general statement that anyone should be well placed to tackle. In fact, some of the best data scientists I've worked with are people who had deep domain expertise in other areas. They were a biologist or a chemist or a physicist. And they knew how to bring their domain knowledge to a business problem and augment it with technical ability to be able to have unique insights and unique abilities to solve those problems. So yes, I do think computer scientists obviously well placed. They've got a strong theoretical background. They've got the programming skills, usually some maths. There's absolutely nothing in the statement of solving business problems with data that is unique to a computer scientist at all.
I fully agree. I think yes. I think the answer is yes. Of course, nothing is impossible. I guess a more maybe detailed answer is how possible if you are not having a computer science like degree. I think it's more possible than you can think of, and especially nowadays. I think the skills that we need actually more like a business needed skill. So I've seen a lot of people like from finance, from economics, from business background are transitioning into tech or machine learning career as long as they are motivated and they prepare themselves to learn some fundamentals about programming, statistics, and mathematics. And of course, those are still the skill that is required. But your degree, I think I would say it, yes, of course it helps, but in a lot of cases now, people look for real experience that you can build up with your portfolio, some sort of like website, you build something. So yes, I think that there are different ways rather than a computer science degree to help you to break into the career. And yes, I have so many other examples of people like that that I encountered, and they were great colleagues. I think to be fair, I would say that it also depends on the role and the industry. I think most of the easier or like success cases that I heard, you should have some sort of skills that somehow be relevant to that industry. For example, let's say you work in finance before, you work in like a accounting company before, so you know a bit about like the finance world. Then like the kind of the middle ground, the transition that you help is that you can work into like a fintech company, like a tech company working in finance industry, or for example, you have some prior experience in, let's say, in the healthcare industry, but not in a tech role, but then you teach yourself some kind of programming, and then you can maybe apply for some companies that share similar themes. So I think those would be the kind of companies and industries and areas that you can prioritize when you prepare for a job.
But just to add, um, degrees to some extent are often just a signaling mechanism, right? Like a lot of people don't remember what they studied in their degree, for example, but they're able to open doors for themselves in the future because they have the prestigious university and degree on their title. So I think a degree is a signaling mechanism. It is also an opportunity for people to acquire knowledge. Not everyone does. But if you are someone who can acquire knowledge and you don't have the degree, then all you need is to just lever yourself in to open one door, and people will then see the knowledge that you have and the capability that you have. So I think don't get faked out by thinking if you don't have the fancy degree that you cannot progress. Work on getting the actual skills and knowledge, and then trust that once you get that opportunity, you will confidently walk through that door and deliver on that job. You will then build the network, and it will never be as hard as that very first step you have to take. That very first door you open will be the hardest door you open. But the most important thing is that when it opens, you can walk through it confidently with the skills and knowledge.
That's so inspiring. I think, as Antonio said, right, it really depends on the role, the industry, and the companies. And I think I've seen scenarios where it really depends on the countries as well. Because, for example, in the UK, it's pretty much, it doesn't matter what you study at university, as long as you get a 2-1 or first, that's already can guarantee that you can pass like the CV round as long as you have the skills that they need. But for some other countries, right, it is more restricted, and in a sense that you need to study specific degree and then you'll be able to get a job in that field. That may change in the future, actually, because I think I do see the good point in the UK where they just hire people from, any kind of degrees, because that brings in the variety of ways of thinking. So people with different degrees, they wouldn't have different ways of thinking how to approach certain problems. And when you bring all of them together, that's actually really benefits the organizations compared to, hiring a bunch of people from the same degree. They have the same way of thinking. Mark, probably if you can, share with people who, let's say they don't have a computer science degree, so they can get the gist of what this really all about. What machine learning actually is, what are the core skills that they need, and what are the common traps that people usually fall into when they learn about machine learning?
Sure. So I think machine learning, to explain to a non-technical audience, is probably best contrasted with maybe just a simple rules-based system. Like, let's say I have, I don't know, my thermostat in my house, and I just want to, when it gets too hot, I just want to turn the thermostat down. When it gets too cold, I want to turn the thermostat up. There is nothing about that really needs any data to learn from. That is just a simple rule that says if it gets above, say, 23 degrees Celsius, I'm going to turn the thermostat off, and if it gets below 18, I'm going to turn the thermostat on. There are many such rules that are actually very useful, and we pretty much put someone on the moon with just almost rules based or some mild statistics, just using these systems. But when the rules aren't so easy to express, for example, if you want to tell the difference between, say, a cat and a dog in an image, then machine learning is a paradigm where you can, and I'm going to just talk about one of the most common paradigms in machine learning called supervised machine learning, where you can essentially learn from data what those rules are. So you could show a model many examples of a dog, of a cat, and the model will infer the rules that distinguish a dog from a cat. We don't explicitly program what those rules are. The machine figures it out from the data itself. And so I think machine learning is really like a subset of AI, where you're just wanting a system to be able to learn and improve from data without explicitly having to say what those rules are. In terms of what the core skills themselves are, I mean, Antonio basically touched on them earlier. I mean, you need to be able to have a basic proficiency in programming. You probably need some maths, depending on the type of machine learning or data science you do. Now, I think that's somewhat variable depending on the role, industry, etc. Because I've worked with data scientists who had PhDs in maths, and I've worked with data scientists who were scared of seeing maths. And all of them, depending on the role they were in, were equally capable. And this is back to the point around, it's essentially solving problems with data. And so you don't always need a hardcore math skill set to do that. However, I would say I think if you had a basic proficiency in stats, you will stand out quite well. So I mean, there are many traps. I think I mean a lot of it applies to just self-studying in general, but I think it's easy as a person excited about machine learning to only care about the algorithm. Like people love learning about the latest model, the fanciest technique. And I feel like a broken record here, and I didn't come on the podcast to just say this line, but if you think about solving problems with data, right, you need more than just the algorithm to do that. You need to know how to frame a business problem. You need to understand what is valuable, what isn't. How are you going to measure that? How are you going to tell if the model's actually doing the thing you directed it to do? What data do you need? How do you know that data is actually representative? You understand the causal power of that data. All these other questions that sit around it that are not just about what is the model I use? How am I going to turn the handle on this machine learning model? So I think not picking representative problems and not working on real world problems is probably one of the key traps. Like you should absolutely, after you've done your first course or whatever, find a problem in your life, try and get some data for it, try and see how you could solve that. It is easier than ever to do this now with AI. You should try and solve a real world problem end to end. That will teach you more about what it is like in industry than any single course, because you will be forced to walk the full walk from framing problem, gathering data, all the way to building, deploying the model, and seeing if it actually solves the problem that you set out to.
Oh, I love the last example, Mark, because it actually shows that, hey, you can get experience or work experience everywhere in your life, right? Even from a very basic things that, tracking and observing, your life, the problems in your life. When it comes to work experience, it doesn't really have to be, okay, you have to go to work for corporate to earn all of those experience. You can actually create experience for yourself and by creating something on your own, right?
Yeah, I mean, it could be as daft as, I don't know, I'm sure everyone's wearing a smartwatch these days. Like, take the data from your smartwatch, see if you can predict your sleep scores from your, diet or your the amount of steps you've done or something else that's other metrics that are being tracked. Like, see if there's some predictive problem you can get there or whatever else. Can you predict I could name a dozen, but I won't.
Yeah, who knows, right? It can be like a unicorn ideas later on. Who knows? So people definitely need to try, like start observing more, thinking outside of the box. I think there's a lot of things that we can do. Right. So as we're talking about machine learning, Mark, can you show us a bit of Nodeledge platform? Because I know that people can leverage Nodeledge to, study math, machine learning.
So Nodeledge is a platform built on an idea called mastery learning. And mastery learning is this idea that you have to learn your prerequisite material before you're allowed to advance. So there's this paradigm in learning science where people can only move on to the material next if you've shown that you've mastered the foundational material. That seems really bloody obvious when you say it out loud, but if you think of how traditional schooling works, where everyone just moves on if they get an A, B, C, D, or E, and then carries on into the next term, into the next year, and you've got people there who have only ever got, C's and D's, now being asked to do more advanced questions, of course they're going to fail because the knowledge gaps that are left behind are just compounded over time. And so it's almost very, very difficult for those people to catch up. So Nodeledge is a platform that I built. I had an idea to use what's called knowledge graphs, and let me share my screen now and I can show you what this looks like. So in Nodeledge, everything is modeled in a graph. What that means is if you started down at the bottom, you wanted to learn something, you're only allowed to progress up, almost like a skill tree. If you're playing a video game, you can only get to fight the next boss if you defeat the bosses before it. It's kind of like this idea. Every single topic you have to learn is mapped, and you move up, you climb up this hierarchy, this skill hierarchy. This ensures that when you are taking a lesson, you've always mastered the lessons below it. You are never in a situation where you have not met the material before. So there's this big skill map that underlies everything in the platform. And then I'm a bit of a learning science geek, so I've spent a lot of time thinking about what are the key ways in which people learn and how the brain works. And those are the ideas that are built into Nodeledge. So there's built-in structure, as you can see from this knowledge graph. You can choose your goals. If you wanted to learn a topic over here, the graph will pull everything you need below it to make sure that you have all the prerequisite lessons in place, to make sure there's going to be no gaps when you design your own learning course. Equally, if you want to skip ahead because you already have some knowledge, you can take a diagnostic test, and that will basically fill out parts of this graph for you. So you don't have to bother relearning material if you already know it. You can just immediately start working at the edge of your knowledge. And then after this, it's about doing lots and lots of deliberate practice where you are in this. Let me show you what a lesson looks like. So this is a little bit cramped. It's a Python lesson. There's an editor to program Python on the right, and each lesson is an explanation, a short explanation of the content, a clear worked example. So you demonstrated the skill itself, and then straight into active problem solving. So the key idea in learning is you want to be active as much as possible. If you're reading or watching or listening, you're basically not active, right? You want to be only doing that just smallest possible time and then doing as many problems as you can. I have like almost 2,000 problems in Nodeledge at the moment, making sure that you're spending like 80–90% of your time actually solving problems. So you're always doing questions. I run this code here, answer a question, moves on to the next question, etc., etc. And you have to pass these questions, otherwise you don't pass a lesson. If you don't pass a lesson, you can't advance. No one is allowed to advance in Nodeledge unless they've made sure that their foundations are secure. So you can learn Python in Nodeledge. There's Python for machine learning and data science in Nodeledge. There's also linear algebra, some of the foundational maths and machine learning and probability come in, where there's loads of cool visualizations that you can play around with. If you enjoy these sorts of things, if you want to learn more advanced topics.
On the example you just showed earlier, so you say that we need to pass a question in order to pass a lesson. So basically, people can't skip lessons.
The idea in the knowledge graph is you can only advance if you've mastered all the nodes below it. So if I was to look at this node, I have to have passed these nodes before. I wouldn't be allowed to do it otherwise. Yeah, there's this lovely phrase, which is like, maybe I'm going to mess it up now, but if you don't learn your prerequisites, they always catch up with you, basically. Like, you can run ahead as far as you want. When you realize you're running slow because you tried to run too fast, and you think about why, you'll realize it's because you didn't have the prerequisite knowledge in place. People jump to the latest fancy thing and struggle. And really what you need to do is go back and fill in your foundations behind that. Once you've got your foundations solid, you'll be able to make smooth progress. And so, yes, you could let people go and tackle problems that are too advanced for them, but they'll just come unstuck. I mean, you see this all the time. People get unstuck by something far too advanced. It's really painful then to have to go back and figure out, why am I stuck? What am I actually missing? How do I fill that gap? and pray for the person who realizes that they're missing like, hours or years of work because they've never learned the prerequisite material. By the time you're an adult and realize you need to know all of statistics or a load of statistics, that's just like, many years of work. So it's much better to be able to make sure that when you're tackling problems, you're actually suited for them. You can build up your foundations, one building block at a time, basically. And that's the kind of idea, to not let people move on to things that are too advanced for them too quickly. You actually make faster progress overall, even though it feels slower at the start, because you're building your knowledge base very carefully. I think it is a trap today where people think that why should I bother learning something? Why should I do it if AI can do it? AI is available to everyone. Nothing to differentiate you if you are just relying on AI. The next person has AI also. They may even be better at using it than you are. The only thing you have is the knowledge and skills and how you apply that. So those are the things you need to invest in.
Love that. Thank you, Mark. Sorry for derailing to your demo.
I want to double down a bit on that because I think it's a great advice, and I feel how difficult it is to actually implement in action because it is hard. Like learning on this foundation and this kind of thing is hard. It's slow, it's painful, it's tedious, but yet still I think it's necessary. I think it's hard, but it's necessary. I think it's just painful, but it is the way it is, and I'm also fully agree with Mark. I think unless you have a very good foundations now, later on, yeah, if you do running something too fast, then you fight back.
Yeah,
If I
absolutely.
may, can I share this? Can you see this diagram?
Yes, we can. Yes.
This is something I'm very passionate about, which is this framing that I think of as you have this green area, what I call like automated knowledge. This is like stuff you know, right? It's like fluent. It flows out of you effortlessly. If your friend or someone asks you about it, you can just tell them straight away, right? You don't have to think about it. You can reason in leaps here. You're very fast, intuitive. And then you have this like orange zone around it, if you think of these dimensions of skills. This is like where you kind of know something, but you're a bit clunky. It's not very fluid. You can kind of get there if you struggle a bit, but maybe you have to like, go back and write some stuff down. But then you have this red zone, which is like your extended knowledge. This is like stuff that I say AI today could do for you, but you don't know about it yourself, right? This both empowering, but also scary, right? Because the red zone is expanded for everyone, but there's a verification gap, right? Like the bigger the gap between the green and the red, the more work you have to put in to verify that what the AI did was correct, or the bigger leap of faith you have to take, right? So your only competitive advantage in this landscape where everyone's red zone is expanded is to expand your green zone, right? Is to build out your automated knowledge base so you can direct and verify what the AI is producing. And I just really want to come back to them what Antonio said, like you have to have this mindset of like long-term investment in yourself, building those foundations. Don't neglect the tools. Absolutely not. Definitely don't neglect your future as well by not investing in the foundations.
Yeah, definitely. And tips for productivity. So if people feel lazy, do like difficult tasks which takes long time, then eat the frog. Do it as the first thing in the morning, or they're most productive in the day and just get that done. The more you delay doing all of these tasks, right, the more likely that you will not do it. So thank you so much both for today, and thank you so much for sharing all of the insights and advice with our audience. To our audience, I hope that you have learned a lot of insights and get a lot of useful information for yourself. This has been the Journey Not Real Talk. See you next time.